Okay guys, we're back working on numbers 13 through 24. Let's start with number 13. So if you look at it, we're raising it to a cube root. So I'm going to rewrite that in fraction form. So I'm going to raise the whole thing, 64x to the 15th over y to the 6th to the 1/3 power. And then I need to think about it as distribution. So I'm going to raise each term, 64 to the 1/3, x to the 15th times 1/3 over y to the 6th times 1/3, and then simplify each expression. So the cube root of 64 is 4, 15 times 1/3 is 5, and 6 times 1/3 is 2. So I'm left with 4x to the 5th over y squared. Next, number 14. Now it looks like there's nothing we can do here. But if you look at the quadratic x squared plus 2x plus 1, we can actually factor that. So I have x plus 1 quantity squared, because I can factor it into x plus 1 times x plus 1. And now if I rewrite this square root as a fraction, I have x plus 1 quantity squared raised to the 1/2. And that gives me 2 times 1/2, which simplifies to just 1, so I'm left with x plus 1. Number 15, same idea. I need to think about it as distribution. So I have s to the 1/2 times 6, and t to the negative 2/3 times 6 as well. Now I can simplify this 1/2 times 6 as 3 over 1, so I'm left with s to the 3rd, and I can simplify the 6 over 3 as 2 over 1, so I'm left with t to the negative 4. Now remember, we can't have negative exponents, so the way I get rid of that is bring it to the denominator. So I'm left with s to the 3rd over t to the positive 4th power. Okay, number 16, same idea. I need to think about it as distribution. So I do x to the n over 2 times negative 8, y to the n over 8 times negative 8, and I need to multiply them. I can simplify 8 over 2 into 4 over 1. I can simplify 8 over 8 as to 1 over 1. So I'm left with x to the negative 4n and y to the negative 1n, or just y to the negative n. Now remember, we don't want negative exponents, so I need to simplify that into 1 over x to the positive 4n times y to the positive n. Okay, number 17. You'll notice it's a 5th root, so I need to rewrite it as a fraction. So I'm going to rewrite this whole thing as a fraction of 1 over 5. So I'm going to write it as negative 32, x to the 10th, y to the 20th, raised to the 1/5. And I need to think about it as distribution. So I'm going to distribute that to each term. So I have negative 32 to the 1/5, x to the 10th times 1/5, and then y to the 20th times 1/5 as well. Okay, now the 5th root of a negative number is in fact just negative 2. If you want to put that on your calculator, make sure you write it as negative 32 in parentheses, caret, in parentheses 1 over 5. And you'll see that it comes out to negative 2. Next, 10 times 1/5 simplifies to just 2, so an x squared. And lastly, 20 times 1/5 is just 4. Now you're thinking, okay, this negative 2, that means I got to put it in the denominator. But we only do that if it's a negative exponent. This, in fact, is a coefficient, so it's going to stay just like that. 18, same idea, but instead of having 2 numbers in the numerator like number 16, we're going to have 1 in the numerator and 1 in the denominator. So I need to distribute it to both the numerator, so x to the 2/7 times 7, and to the term in the denominator, y to the negative 3 times 7. Okay, I can simplify 7 over 7 to 1 over 1, so I'm left with x squared in the numerator, and I need to multiply negative 3 times 7, which gives me y to the negative 21st. But remember, we can't have negative exponents, so I need to flip this denominator up into the numerator, which gives me my final answer of x squared times y to the 21st. Okay, we're almost done here. Number 19, it says rewrite exponential expression into radical expression. So we're given exponential. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it off into the 2 parts, a to the 1/2 times 3. So I know I'm looking at a square root. So I'm going to have a square root of a, and then under that square root, I'm going to cube that a. Okay, next, number 20. You need to look at what is being raised to the power of 2/3. In fact, it's only the x. So I'm going to leave that -2 on the outside, and I'm going to break this x into the 1/3, and I'm going to square that. And now I notice that that's a cube root, so I'm going to leave the -2 on the outside, put a cube root of x, and then under that cube root, I'm going to square it. Number 21, same idea. I'm going to put the whole thing, 4x plus 3, raise it to the 1/4, and then raise that to the 3rd, because I broke 3/4 into 2 parts. And so that's a 4th root, so I'm going to take the 4th root of all of that, 4x plus 3, and then in parentheses, underneath it, I'm going to put the 3. Okay. 3 more problems. Number 22, we have to rewrite, given radical, rewrite it as exponential. So what I'm going to do first is, I'm going to rewrite this root, it's a 1/3, or a cube root, so I'm going to rewrite it as 1/3. So now I have x to the 4th to the 1/3 power. And now if you multiply those two together, you get x to the 4/3. Okay. 23, the negative's on the outside, so just leave it on the outside. And now we have a square root here, so I'm going to write 3x to the 5th to the 1/2. And in fact, I'm okay if you leave it just like this. Okay, you can rewrite it like this if you want to, 3 to the 1/2, x to the 5/2. But if you leave it like the first one, I'm okay with that. And last but not least, the only thing being raised to the square root is the x to the 3rd. So the 2y is going to stay the same, and I'm going to have an x to the 3rd to the 1/2. Simplify this by multiplying. I get 2yx to the 3/2. That's my final answer.